I'm Prakash Belawadi, so I'll begin right away. I've read the first draft or whatever ready draft that she had that she was able to send me many months ago. I got a copy of this book only last night, so I've not read it, but I've read the draft that she had sent to me to read. So I'll begin with this. You know, Ruku, just as even the poem that you have at the beginning of the book, that you were made a poet because your limbs could speak. I imagine that you mean by that even your Abhinaya can tell a story, and that you're articulate. I know you meant it differently, but I also know that you are genuinely very articulate, that you speak very well. That you have many forms of the movement arts. You're an actor as well. I'm always fascinated that people need to express themselves through words eventually. Why is it that you wanted to do that? I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just fascinated by the idea. Why do you think we all like to tell who we are or what we do or what we found out with words?
I think I didn't start out wanting to write, actually. It was more because it started off as this book, which is a coffee table book. There's this trip that I make every year, I think for over 20 years, during Shivaratri to all the temples in Tamil Nadu. And I perform. And the stages are not amazing. They don't have fantastic lighting, and it's not technically perfect. But I really, really enjoy it. And those are some of the shows I really look forward to going to every year. And I do multiple performances a night. In the last few years, sometimes my students have joined me as well, but sometimes it's 3 shows that night. So I'll dance 7 to 8, drive 8:30 to 9:30, drive again 10:30 to 11:30. Sometimes it's a packed audience and they're like literally thousands of people. And sometimes there might be 20 people based on the day that you get or which temple that you're in. Most of the time, the crowds are completely mixed. They are not the people that you see in like a refined city auditorium that you're used to. But they stay and they watch dance. And it's such a beautiful experience because it's not, if any of these things weren't right in an auditorium, if the sound wasn't coming right or if the carpet was folding up, these things would really upset a performer, actually, because it hinders the way you dance, right? But in those places, it doesn't matter at all.
So I'm interrupting because you have not come to the question yet, but I want to just tell you what I think of that so that you can see if that also makes sense to you. See, there is this idea that the difference between a performance and a ritual, for instance, is that one is a acharane, where everybody participates. If you go to a wedding or a puja or somebody's birthday party, it's not just the person getting married or person celebrating birthday who is actually doing the observation or the acharane. Everybody there is participating in it. So that is the idea of what is folk or janapada, Yeah. Whereas a performance separates the spectator from the performer, right? So that may be the difference. Do you think?
One of the things also that I've spoken about in the book and how it's different to dance there. So what started off as a photographic kind of journey. So 2 of my friends who are excellent photographers, Anup Jkat and Vivian, they joined me in 2020. And we went through these 13, 15, I think more than 15, 16 temples. And they took photographs. I was meant to write small things in between that would be, that would kind of give a reader an insight into this journey. It was a lockdown. I started writing and writing and writing. And there was just so much to say that, yeah, that's why I ended up writing.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry I interrupted your train of thoughts. You have done, I mean, to use the term loosely, contemporary dance in Boston, the Boston Conservatory. You have trained under various gurus. I know that when you performed that play with me, you quickly grasped and you did incorporated Burmese, Thai, Southeast Asian, dance traditions into your performance. And you could have chosen to be anything. You could have been a contemporary dancer. What do you think compels you to come back or makes you come back to an Indic form? It's important for me to ask the next question. That's why.
I think that, firstly, I think there's one of the things is that there is a matter of training and years. Although I did do ballet for a while, I started in my teens. Even jazz or contemporary dance, like if you think of contemporary dance as a movement tradition, not as a thought process. But for me, I think contemporary dance is more an approach to creation as opposed to a vocabulary of movement itself. But I think that there is something inherently me in Bharatanatyam. And I can't exactly say that it's the form, that it's the origin, that it's the movement aesthetic, the rhythmic phrasing. I think the physical gestural aesthetic as well, that feels more my first voice than anything else. So I love dancing the other forms. It's not that I don't, but I think I speak better in Bharatanatyam.
I know once you called me with great irritation. I was not in India at that time. You were so annoyed with Abhinava Darpana, I think. No? It is true that in the Indic prescriptive literature about the performance, you have to wade through a lot because you cannot, you don't know which one of that is actually comes from genuine thinking and grappling with communication that you want to do. And some of it could be just mumbo jumbo, of the time that gets mixed up because of oral tradition. I mean, we don't have Bharata's Natya Shastra. We only know what Abhinava Gupta said. So I'm going to bring you to this question that, the Indian tradition of the arts, of our narratology, is very, very crucially concerned with three words that you cannot separate from anything that we do, which are profound, which is rasa, dhvani, and auchitya. I'll leave out rasa. I mean, as you know, why we cannot do it in this talk, but we will come to dhvani, after we clear this idea of auchitya. Beautiful as it is, say the ballet form. I mean, when you're performing Swan Lake, then it comes, with some classical idea of a narrative. But sometimes you don't need that or you don't have that. Certainly in contemporary dance, you may or you may not have it. The question about auchitya is that, see, auchitya, I'm just saying it for those here who are like me, who just have to find out things much later in their lives. So auchitya is that, for instance, in literature, when Eliot rants about objective correlative in Hamlet, saying, should this guy be like, howling so much about an incident like that? That is like, that idu uchitana, that is what auchitya means. Is this like proportionate? Let's see, put it that way. I want to be crude because we don't have time. Now, the thing about doing classical dances is that a bulk of it is taken from either the epics or the Puranic literature, where you have extreme forms, the pain of Harishchandra, or separation, or terrible sacrifices. You do, like in Indian cinema of the past, why melodrama was suitable then was because you did extreme situations set in police stations, in hospitals. It's not that we have changed now. It's just that it's not relatable anymore. If you have in a very large shed, you have a very big fight. Actually, it's not people don't fear that. They're not going to encounter that in their lives, but police, disease, stuff like that we encounter. So that is why melodrama used to be, it seemed suitable then. It's increasingly not so suitable. But when you do dance, when you do contemporary dance, what I've seen you do, like nuance, just moments of life, where. Now the thing is, how do you arrive at this balance of auchitya? To me, it's because it doesn't come, I would think, from Indian training. Although I'm saying it to your face, you're a very great artist. So you struggle, and I see how you work. But even so, there is no training to deal with this, I think, in the classical Indian way. How do you think you arrived at that? Do you think your training abroad helped, or how do you do that?
I think acting helped. I think obviously I learned a lot from you, and also from acting school. There is, and one of the main things is that when I was reading the Natya Shastra, I haven't read the whole thing, but good sections of it I've repeated.
Nobody has.
Good sections of it I've repeated. There's one thing that they speak about is this balance between Lokadharmi and Natya Dharmi. And I think this is a concept that is very misunderstood in today's dance world, because I believe that Natya Dharmi is a physical aesthetic of standing or keeping your elbows up and being within the vocabulary of Bharatanatyam, or whatever form that may be. But I understood, I think, from I think sometime when we were working together, actually, that it's not just that it's actually the rules of the stage. Like a piece of paper can be the golden, I don't know, cup that everyone searches for, or this glass bottle can become a child. So the fact that this glass bottle being a child on stage is fine, is Natya Dharmi, and Lokadharmi is things that are in the world. But very often nowadays, because we reference Puranas, things that, like you said, things that in this world that people don't really connect to, we reference things that are no longer common knowledge very often in Bharatanatyam. And we also stick to a particular physical aesthetic that people don't necessarily understand, codified aesthetic, which is actually from the Abhinaya Darpana of all the gestures. I thought that I would like to use things that are in my world, even while speaking of Yashoda or Radha or characters within the Mahabharata or Draupadi or whoever, and see how, because emotions don't change, people don't change. The same gestures that's in the Lord of the Rings or that big, any of these mythical movies. So I think I observe life. So if there is a line where Yashoda says that the things that you did when you were young, I was so proud of, rather than referencing Kalinga Nartana or you Putanahara or any of these, I tend to see how my family behaves with children, or how my, I have a niece and nephew, and how does my mom behave with them? How does my dad, my brother, my husband, how do they play with the children? So, and I infuse Yashoda with that, as opposed to a mythical personification of Krishna.
In, say, Putana Kanagal's film, after he's been scolded by his teacher, the teacher leaves and the character played by Vishnuvardhan sits there sulking, and his teacher's wife comes and gives him food. And then the camera pans up, and on the wall is a photograph of Yashoda and Krishna. You know, because there are three kinds of, you're absolutely right, I think, at least makes sense to me, because see, there are three kinds of semiotic worlds that performances inhabit. You know, see, one is that there is an organic semiotics. That means you said like universal justice of the world, clutching your head, you know, or rolling your eyes, or hanging your head down. You know, there's a organic, human, universal gestural world of semiotics. Then there's a classical trained world of, like, you know, Kalinga Nartana or Vishwamitra saying, "Go away, I'm a rishi, I don't know anything about you." So this is classical. But there is what you call just lokadharmi, that every day in your life that you pick up. And to find that balance is what is auchitya. Okay, right? So that is correct. And it covers a little bit of dhvani also, but I'll return to that, because now the idea of dhvani is that a word or an image that connects to a word which can make you think, this actually resonates with a culture and experience. So the word pushpa, this is the example I always give. The word pushpa is not synonymous with flower. Because when you say flower and say, name 3 flowers, it's very unlikely that with pushpa you will say rose. You know, but with it's very likely that rose will figure when you say flower. So we say that this is the same thing with gesture. You cannot shrug in a Desi language, in an Indian language, because it seems like you're an artificial person if you shrug in one of the Indian language. You try it, you'll find out. It seems like difficult to do that. Or let's say you cannot use stress in the way the English language uses stress in an Indian language. So the same thing with gesture. So that is dhvani. So when you decide auchitya and you make a gesture, it's one thing. But let's say you go and get, you know, a pot and feed him butter, is one thing. That's a classical idea. But you run and give him something else. You have to use some other, maybe you mime it, but some other prop or you do, which is not actually telling the story, but it's telling a feeling. It illustrates a feeling. That is dhvani, okay? I'm curious on how you use it. I've seen how you do it, but because you've written, I want to know what your conscious thought about is, because that would be interesting to a literary audience.
I think that when, like you're saying that within a traditional context, there are certain things that figure and some things that don't, right? Especially with Bharatanatyam, because the vocabulary itself encompasses the gesture, the gestural aesthetic as well.
Especially when you use sahitya.
Yeah. So the gesture becomes a part of the Bharatanatyam vocabulary also. So that is something that I've had to contend with while deciding this. And like you said, the shrug is a very modern way of living. And then when we look at the overall gestural vocabulary, that's from a time that is not right now, it does become a question of, does it work in this particular context, in this choreography? Like, for example, I was teaching my children this piece and they say, Kachina paletare, kalkandi chini tare. So she's saying, I'll give you milk, but I let them use a glass. So you say, shall I give you a glass? Okay, fine. So she's allowed to use the gesture. Okay, you don't want it? Fine, I'll have it myself. You want the chini? Okay, no problem. So it is there, but then the way she stands or Yashoda walks still is within that vocabulary. So there is, you have to play and figure out from one to the other.
It's an example of Vyangya. It's an example of irony. The moment you become conscious,
Yeah.
then irony enters into it. When irony comes, you can handle it because irony is a moderator. That's
Yeah.
why. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I understand.
So you should listen to her, I think, and I'll moderate. I'll just be rude if somebody is talking for too long, but if there are questions you should ask, and
Very good afternoon, madam. Can you hear?
Yeah.
Recently, you have come out of videos with underwater photography, and your performance was very good, especially in Maldives, that ocean, Indian Ocean. So, what made you to inspire to come out of those videos, and how challenging it was? Because the instructions, capturing everything, you won't hear. What was the secret behind? Yeah, thank you.
I think to do anything under the water, you have to have a lack of fear. So I'm not afraid. I'm not a good swimmer, but so that's the secret. And in the beginning, if you think of it, it becomes hard. But once I'm under the water, actually, my friend who actually worked on this book with me, Anup, he is like, why don't you think of dancing? And then everything was fine. So, but obviously there's a lot of training. It's not just that. You have to learn to hold your breath and not be afraid at the same time. Yeah. That's not what the book is about. It's not about where it is exactly. Shiva here actually represents that idea of oneness that you have with all of humanity, irrespective of country, place, or time. And it's more about how when one is in that sphere of performance, irrespective of what art form they are embracing at the time, how the world falls apart, like in the sense that if I end up being Rukmini when I'm dancing, if I'm thinking of myself, then the dance will cease to be as it should be. Or if you are singing and you're thinking of yourself, of the identity outside of the performance, or outside of the art ceases to exist the way it should exist. And then I feel, this is a personal thought, I feel that this is one of the things I say in my book, is that after a performance, I stand there and I receive all these accolades and everyone says, wow, amazing dance. Rukmini, you were wonderful. But then I think that actually you're applauding something where Rukmini was no longer present. So that's what Finding Shiva is about.
The idea of Visarjana is there. I'm sorry, I interrupted the applause. Go ahead, please. See, there's an idea of Visarjana that is, we've discussed it a lot, so I'm saying it. In a recorded medium, even without the performer being present, you can watch a movie. But in a play performance, the Natya Shastra or Indic thought does not separate music, dance, or drama, which is why I feel very good when she says acting helps. The thing is that you come on stage, actually the Sutradhara invokes many times the patra into the actor. The actor is on stage and the Sutradhara says, you will be Rama today. And then that person becomes Rama. The declaration is made. But at the end, in the theater tradition around the world, in the performative tradition around the world, in the dance at the end, when they come and do that, and they're saying, I'm no longer that, I'm just this, In the recorded medium, that thing never happens, which is why you can have superstars in the recorded medium. It's very difficult to get them from this world, She's an she's an actress, on for the screen as well, and on stage. I'm trying to persuade her to play Draupadi in a very big play that I'm trying to do. We have 1 minute. So I'll leave the 1 minute to her with this last question. You know, this not being sensible when you try out so many things, being sensible to the idea that there is a tradition, a branch of music, there's something known as raga. There are raga, there's a time to play the raga. There's a time of day to play the raga, not just a season. There's a mood and there's an occasion for it. This is part of of Indian, especially codified at least by Abhinava Gupta, let us say. So not to be separated from it was a very good idea, I think. And what do you think can be done to restore this integration? Because I think a lot of your book is about journey, performance, feeling, a local belief system. It walks in that difficult, complex zone between what is folk and what is performance. So do you think this book helps? It can be located in that world of negotiation?
Between the world we live in today and the tradition.
Between the world of belief, between the world of culture, long-held thoughts, between the world of tradition and argument and rationality, you know, between mythos and logos, if you wish, you know.
Not really, because I think that it's more about what happens to one in performance, and how I think that when you are performing, or when you are with any art or anything for that matter, I just speak of dance because that's what I know. If I sing, I'll definitely be Rukmini. I won't be lost in the music, and neither will anybody else. But I think that if there is, the main thing that I try to arrive at, or what I've thought about in the book, is that when one dances and they are lost to the dance, is the only time Satvika Abhinaya can arise. And Satvika Abhinaya's inadvertent reactions within the body can happen. That's also with acting as well. It can happen only when I cease to be Rukmini. All the other Abhinayas, all the other Abhinayas are done with technique and training. So whether it's music or lighting, all of that is done with technique and training. So this is the only thing that comes inadvertently when there is a loss of, of Rukmini. So when that happens and there is this suspended, there is an observer that emerges. And the point of the book is how, if I can have that observer through life as well, wouldn't I be a better person?
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.